Hey everybody, Felix Staffelbaker here. This is a report from the World Economic Forum from April 30th, 2018. This is well before the pandemic was made public. And it says a digital currency should be adopted as the world's leading reserve currency. It's interesting that the professor Zhao Gang, maybe Zhang, is from the University of Hong Kong. And it says that in a monetary system that has become increasingly urgent, the move from a unipolar to a multipolar world order has not been particularly orderly. Instead, it has produced a kind of monetary non-system that depends on a debt-driven, dollar-based model that is too pro-cyclical, fragile, and potentially based to support the management of, potentially biased to support the management of trade conflict. At the root of the problem are the structural trade and current account imbalances that arise from the so-called Triffin dilemma. In order to meet the global demand for the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency, the United States must run persistent current account deficits with the rest of the world. Last year, the deficit reached $474 billion, or 2.4% of GDP. It can acquire low-cost funding for its fiscal deficit and natural debt amounts to what former French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing famously called America's exorbitant privilege. But that privilege can erode the country's fiscal discipline as it has in recent years, resulting in high federal deficits, $833 billion, or 4.2% of GDP in 2018, and growing federal debt of $21 trillion, or 104% GDP as of March. So in 2018, we're at 21 trillion. We're at like way more than that now. The policies favored by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration exacerbate this tendency. Recent tax cut and increased military spending have led the International Monetary Fund to estimate that the U.S. international investment position will deteriorate in the coming years, with net liabilities reaching 50% of GDP growth by 2022. Moreover, Trump's threats of trade and currency wars are fueling fears that the U.S. dollar could become a weapon in geopolitical disputes, which it already did in 2022 whenever the Federal Reserve repatriated their treasuries from Russia. That changed everything, but that's not in this article. That was years later. Such a step would trigger immense volatility throughout the international monetary system, throwing many economies, such as those that link their currencies to the U.S. dollar to hold a large volume of dollar reserves, into crisis. Of course, the Triffin dilemma can be avoided, and America's outsized influence over the monetary system reduced. All that is needed is a major reserve currency that is not issued by a national authority. Gold was once supposed to fill this role, but it couldn't meet the demand for global liquidity as a store of value. A better option is the IMF's Special Drawing Rights, or SDR, which the Second Amendment of the body's Article of Agreement asserts could become the world's principal reserve asset. Some, including former People's Bank of China Governor Zhao Jingjuan and former Colombian Prime Minister Jose Antonio Ocampo, have since advocated following through on that plan. Yet the SDR has not used widely enough to serve as a major international reserve currency, according to Palais Royal Initiative report. The key was to raise the SDRs, and the calls for the IMF to work with the private sector to explore ways in which the SDR could be more widely used in private transactions. The key hurdle of the SDR has always been the geopolitical interests and priorities of the reserve issuing central banks, not just the U.S., but also the Eurozone, China, Japan, United Kingdom. But the advent of cryptocurrencies may offer another way. The private sector can work directly with central banks to create a digital SDR to use as a unit of account and a store of value. Such an ESDR would, in a sense, be the quintessential reserve asset because it would be fully backed by reserve currencies in the IMF determined ratio. The supply of SDRs would be completely dependent on market demand. Of course, to enable a gradual shift from the US dollar to an ESDR as the dominant international reserve currency, a sufficiently large ESDR denominated money market would need to be created. To that end, a political neutral body owned by the private sector or central banks should be established to issue the asset. Participating central banks and asset managers would then have to swap their reserve currency holdings for ESDRs. Once the private sector comes to view the ESDR as a less volatile unit of account than individual component currencies, asset managers, traders, and investors could begin to price their goods and services and value their assets and liabilities accordingly. For example, the Chinese government's massive Belt and Road Initiative could be conducted in ESDRs. In the longer term, the international financial center such as London or Hong Kong could spearhead experimentation with ESDRs using blockchain technology, with special swap facilities being created to make the asset more liquid. Another imperative would be to create an ESDR denominated debt market, which would appeal to countries that want to avoid getting caught in the crossfire between reserve issuing currencies, multinational firms and regional pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds. The ESDR denominated debt market would even be good for all reserve currencies except for the dollar, as their weight in determining the asset's value exceeds their current shares in foreign exchange markets. In the longer term, the ESDR could put added pressure on the U.S. to rein in its spending. The rise of cryptocurrencies has created a unique opportunity for market forces to spearhead a shift towards a truly neutral reserve asset. With the U.S. leadership more unpredictable than ever, it is an opportunity that should not be missed. And that is the World Economic Forum in 2018 talking about it. Something that caught my attention would be that in the longer term, international financial centers such as London or Hong Kong could experiment the experimentation with ESDRs using blockchain technology. EOS had in 19 was being issued, I think it was the year of the bull, they issued the red envelopes with like $30 worth of whatever currency it was, maybe yuan, in order to try out their facility in that region, and it was just a test. And so something like that could happen. They were only able to spend it in certain areas, and it had to use it by a certain time or it expired. And that Hong Kong has the guy here that started this program, and then in Hong Kong you've got Yves LaRose meeting with the Chinese Hong Kong officials to see how they can help implement EOS. So he's rolling that out, thinking that people are thinking that he's just going there on a whim and going to try to appeal to reason and help them out. Meanwhile, we've documented for a long time that this is a public rollout. They have to make it palatable. They have to go step by step. We know the end goal is EOS in every database, that EOS will take over the world, and that's going to happen. And so they have to make it step by step. They still have to go through the process and get all the masses on board so that they don't immediately go from here to there and potentially be disrupted by the masses not wanting that, when in reality they'll be begging for it when it's time. But it made me think that basically EOS could be a call option on Bitcoin. So if you have both of those, you're going to win. You're either going to have an ESDR and it's going to run on top of EOS blockchain, or you're going to have Bitcoin and it's freedom money and you win there. So you win both ways if you just hold EOS and Bitcoin. I don't think people are really pointing that out. So I just want to put that out there. The World Economic Forum is talking about a global neutral currency, and here it is. It's time. So I just want to put that out there. Staffelmaker out.